Hey everyone, it's Kristen. So this is part 3, which hopefully is the last part on this, the Marvel Vault Museum in the Book. So today we're going to talk about the 80s, and in the 80s something really cool happened. The X-Men became the best-selling book at Marvel. Yay! Of course Spider-Man was still super popular, but X-Men became the best-selling book. Thanks in part to stories like the Phoenix, the Dark Phoenix Saga, and they actually introduced Alpha Flight, which is significant because one of the characters, Snowbird, she's one of my favorites. Like, she's pretty obscure. Not many people know about her, but like I don't know, she's just always been one of my favorite characters because I like the look of her and I like her origin. I think she's just really cool. And then also in 1979, Frank Miller came onto the scene to write Daredevil. Of course, people know him from earlier from Sin City, but like Daredevil is where he really like took off. I mean, people mostly know him for his run on Daredevil, if not for Sin City. And this is what I was talking about in a different video. I think it was X-Men, Uncanny X-Men 244, where She-Hulk is saying like, hey, if you don't read my book, buy my book, I will come and tear up all your X-Men comics. Like I said, I thought it was pretty funny. Yeah. And then this is actually the original Captain Marvel. And this is a panel showing his death. And then, of course, like Ms. Marvel took up the mantle of Captain Marvel after he died, and you can see the suit is very similar. And Spider-Man became was the 80s were the introduction of the Venom symbiote, and he had his in Secret Wars, he had his black costume, and then of course, I mean, Venom is still like a super popular character today. I mean, most people know who that is. And then look, Spider-Man got a float in the Macy's Day Parade. I always I watch that every year. And then of course, like, he got married, which I have that Barbie. We talked about that Barbie in the Marvel superhero Barbies video. And speaking of that, in here is a little like wedding invitation that they sent out to get readers excited about the storyline. And when you visited the Marvel offices, you had to have a badge that said visitor. And this is pretty cool. This is the no prize book. When people would write into Stan and say, hey, I noticed in like this issue you said this, you wrote this, but that contradicts this. So he's like, congratulations, you get a no prize prize. This is what they put out in response in 1982. And look, you see him. He's wearing Spider-Man slipper socks. And it says right and left on him. It's pretty funny. It's just a cute little book to, talk about how people have written in and said, hey, you messed up on this, and Stan's like, congratulations, you get the no prize. And he, in this little illustrated book, like, he talks about the things that, are that got messed up on accident. And he owns up to it and stuff. So I thought that was pretty funny because I remember reading those and reading about, hey, congratulations, you get the no prize prize. And then we had the introduction of Moon Knight. And then in the 90s, we see basically the 90s were kind of funny because like there was the whole comic book speculation thing where a certain issue, it could be worth a lot, so you better buy a ton of copies of it, because older issues had sold for quite a bit of money. Um, just like, I don't know if anyone remembers the Beanie Babies. That's embarrassing. But yeah, I had some of those, and I thought, oh yeah, someday these will be worth lots of money because, somebody told me that, and of course that's not true. Not at all. But people bought like tons of issues, like for example of X-Men 1. There was like 5 different variations of this, and then this comic book. And people bought like all of the variations and sometimes like several issues of that certain variation in hopes that it would be worth a lot of money someday. It wasn't. The only reason why the earlier issues were worth so much is that they were scarce, and people buying all these issues and Marvel like reprinting all these issues and selling all these issues, that didn't necessarily mean, like, just because an issue sold 1 million copies did not mean it had 1 million readers. It just was that issue was rumored or predicted to be worth money someday, so people bought it up in droves. And basically later in the 90s the bottom fell out of that, and yeah. It was not good because everyone thought, yeah, it's gonna be, anyway. So 90 saw introduction of Todd McFarlane on Spider-Man. Like, everyone remembers his run. I mean, he just, like, the way he drew Spider-Man, it was just super inspired. Like, he put him in all kinds of twisted body positions that you would never think of as a normal human being able to do, but because it's Spider-Man, and it was just really cool. Like, his work was just really iconic, and so was Jim Lee's work on X-Men. And so Marvel was actually traded on the public stock exchange, and here's like a certificate you would get, if you bought some of their stock. So that's pretty cool. Too bad it's not like a real certificate. But that would be nice. So, and then you saw like the rise of characters like I said, Venom and the Punisher, more gritty, dark characters, Daredevil. And they had in the 90s, you have to check out this. I'll probably do a video on this, but they had a series called Marvels, and it was written by Kurt, and I'm going to butcher his name, Busiek, because I don't want to butcher it, and illustrated by Alex Ross. Thank you, Alex, for having an easy name to pronounce. But I mean, Alex also has worked on, well, obviously he's worked on Marvel and DC, but this was such an iconic series that was done. I mean, I have it, and it's so cool. It's like photorealism, it's paintings, but it's photorealism. It's pretty cool. Like, it's a really cool, like, it's taken from this perspective of this photojournalist, and he sees, all the superheroes, and he's been there all along through all of it. It's a really cool story. Like, you should definitely check it out. Yeah. So the comic book bubble burst. 1996, Marvel filed for bankruptcy because they went through this huge expansion because they thought, they were doing so well. They were selling all these issues, but then that didn't mean they were gaining more readers, though, because they thought, oh, I'm selling 1 million issues of this comic, so I must have 1 million readers. So those readers will continue to buy issues. So I'll have like at least 1 million, issues sold per 1 million copies sold per issue. But that wasn't the case. Like I said, people were just buying up certain comic books because they thought they'd be worth a lot. And then, so yeah, they like overestimated how well they were doing, so to speak. And so they filed for bankruptcy. And then like Toy Biz, which was actually part of Marvel at the time, because they struck this deal to, have them make the action figures, which if you watch my action figure videos on X-Men, you'll see some of the action figures that were made in the in the 90s, early 90s. So Toy Biz took over the company in 1997, and stability restored the way they restructured it and everything. So they tried to like pull in new readers by basically doing away with everything that we know about the characters and restarting them. Like the Avengers, Captain America, Fantastic Four, Iron Man were outsourced to Image. Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, I think that's how you pronounce his name. His work is remembered on New Mutants as being really iconic also. So they basically, like I said, they totally redid them, which did not make the true fans happy because, you know, why would you just totally redo something? Or if it's not broke, don't fix it, basically. So, and then later, like a year later, they did Heroes Reborn, where they, fixed that mistake, basically. Well, it's not a mistake, but you know what I mean. And apparently, I did not know this. Marvel had its own restaurant. Like, and here's a copy of the menu, which I think is so awesome. Like mutant chicken wings for $6.50. I mean, this is so cool. Like, I want to do a whole video on this, but yeah, that probably wouldn't be that interesting. But anyway, so they had like 4 of these restaurants. Of course, one starting in Hollywood, obviously, but that because the restaurant fad was a thing, the themed restaurant, like Planet Hollywood sort of thing. But unfortunately, those all closed just 2 years later because there wasn't enough of a demand for it yet. I bet if they opened them now, with how popular the movies are, I think it would do well. And then they have, of course, the Universal Studios has, some X-Men themed. The Island of Adventures theme park in Orlando. And then, of course, like you had in the 2000s, they decided to produce the Ultimate line. So basically, they retold the story, the origins of all of the characters, but they kept the originals and just said, hey, this is basically just a separate entity from our original comics, but you can still enjoy this series too. And they went through like they produced a line of like comic books for more mature audiences because they had their own basically comic books code of authority in-house, and they dubbed those like for mature audiences, and they had the whole they basically did different like series and alternate universes, like 1602, where all the all the characters are set back in that time. And of course, the movies. It's so funny because everyone talks about Black Panther being the first, major black superhero movie, but a lot of people forget about Blade. There were 3 of those movies. I really like those movies, but of course I like most superhero movies. And then of course the X-Men movies and Spider-Man, the first Spider-Man trilogy, and then Fantastic Four. I mean, 2000s were just like a boom of movies for Marvel. And that's kind of what started it all. I mean, honestly, and of course now Marvel is owned by Disney, which is kind of weird, but kind of cool, I guess. I mean, pretty soon, before you know it, Disney's going to own like everything. But I mean, I like Disney, but it's still weird to have Marvel owned by Disney. But I'm excited because now, eventually, like we can do an Avengers and X-Men, movie. That'd be awesome. So I'm not gonna hold my breath though. That's not gonna happen for like years and years and years and years down the road. But anyway, that's this book. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you join me for future videos. Until next time, bye.